Well, Bobby, to your point, I guess this is as good a time as any to bring this up. We did have Goodman was on the pod. I'm sorry, it was the Goodman Ryan podcast with Jay King, and they were talking. Yeah. They were talking about the Celtics, and they in fact had Goodman had talked to a player, an NBA player who very recently played the Celtics. Didn't name the player, but had this to say. So I'm going to play this clip for you guys because it plays exactly into what you were saying, Bobby, with the offense this year. So take a listen.
Obviously, but I was asking him last night a little bit of his thoughts of the Celtics, and he said Tatum and Brown can't be your superstars and only do things that help their game. They don't get anyone else easy shots. All they know how to do is score. Doesn't help the Kemba. Kemba doesn't help their center. They don't help anyone either. They don't turn down tough shots to get another guy an easy shot. So teams are onto them. That's basically what he said. Teams are onto them, load up on those two, and live with them taking long twos. And
that's a good.
Oh no, John, where'd you go?
Oh, we lost John.
I can't. Oh, okay. I thought it was just me.
Yeah, it's not just you. It usually is just you.
Sorry, guys. You got me?
Yep.
I got you.
I was going to just let that roll. I was just going to agree with John.
So Jay King afterwards was like, that's really good scouting report there, because it was talking about the kind of stagnation. And everyone's going to look at this as a dig on Tatum and Brown. I think it's as much representative of just the lack of depth that they have around them and this feeling that these guys have to take it all upon themselves. But you're right. The offense has become so much built on these guys generating their own. And we've even said on this show, like, why are they passing to Grant Williams? But to the point that, when it goes bad, sometimes is when you really notice it. And it's like, wow, Jaylen didn't look up at all on that whole possession. We were joking, like, he won't pass to Neesmith. He's right there. But, Jaylen went through stretches. He did it on that stretch where he hit the 3 threes. It's great that he hit them, but he had a 5-possession stretch there. When the ball hit his hands, he was like, nope, not giving it up. And he hadn't been touching it a lot. He didn't get a ton of touches tonight, but Tatum kind of the same way. He keeps kind of forcing the ball into the lane a little bit and turning it over, but it has become a very predictable offense in that regard with those guys.
Yeah, but that's exactly what we were talking about when we talked about when those guys are completely focused on getting the best shot. Not for them or just for the open guy, or whether it's someone that they truly believe in and have confidence in. That's when we see records being broken. Shemi Hiljale, like that was that night, right? We talked about it that night. I'm at the Garden. I'm like, listen, this is a completely different team when Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum, but specifically Jayson Tatum, when he's just out to get theirs. Like, he's not out to get his. Like, he's out to get everybody else's. And he's like, look, I'll get mine's, in due time, in the flow of the offense. Like, that's it. And I just don't – I'm not sure these guys are confident enough in these guys, though, to make that an everyday thing. Like, let's be honest. Like, do you think Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown are confident enough in these guys to do this every single night? I just don't think that's the case. I just think they pick and choose which nights are going to be the night to do it. Obviously, they're not going to just be stingy with the ball on other nights. They try to blend it in, but, of course, you're going to see that balance – tip the scale depending on the opponent.
But it does make them easier to defend because like if Tatum, for example, that's why he's running into so many guys out there. One of the reasons he's having a tough time getting to his spots to get his shots. They keep running guys out at him because they know that's what's going to happen. And then that's what the offense becomes. You're 16 seconds into the shot clock until Tatum realizes maybe I don't have this, and then it becomes a scramble and you don't necessarily get a quality shot. But when that becomes your whole offense, every single time they've had one of those games where, record-breaking games or whatever, it's always those 27, 28 assist games when they're whipping the ball around a lot more and they're creating movement. They're definitely harder to defend there. It's an easier team to defend when the ball's just sitting in one person's hands. Especially when you don't have the space when you don't have shooters spacing the floor where there's a threat of, if I am doubling this guy, you're not going to pay for it. So you can sell out to defend these guys and key on them, and you're probably not going to pay the price there.
Yeah, this isn't a new phenomenon.
You're going to go into hero ball. Yeah,
it's not.
For Tatum in particular, we're talking about him being the point guard of this team effectively since the bubble. So he's been going through the ups and downs of that transition since then, and I feel like he's in a fairly comfortable spot when it comes to that. Brown's newer to the party in that sense, so I'm expecting even more up and downs from him at that position, higher turnover games like he had tonight, and just a growing process of being there, because those are the only two guys you trust effectively at this point, being on that ball. Maybe Kemba to some degree at this point, but with his finishing issues and some of the other concerns we've talked about with him, turnovers too for him, you'd like to see him phased out a little bit in that role, and more Jaylen, more Tatum. So, might there be bumps in the road through a regular season stretch in terms of their facilitation abilities? Maybe, but it's all the kind of stuff we've talked about, to where who cares if they're the 5th seed this year just because they take a few extra losses.
You just want to hit the playoffs running. Yeah.
Yeah. So I saw that Josue on Sunday, or Wednesday rather, against the Hawks.
Yeah.
I saw them kind of phasing out some guys. Grant, Neesmith certainly has been phased out by them as ball handlers sometimes, but I think it's the right decision, because to the player's point that they don't make teammates better, I disagree with that. I think Tice is made better by those guys. Rob, probably
I think
a guy
makes
like,
Jayson better.
yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of everything. And even we've seen Semi Ojeleye be a little bit better this year too, like in certain spots. But it does come back to the personnel.
That's all.
Yeah. You give everybody some credit on all sides of it, right?
They made Hayward better. They made Rozier better. No.
Well, this is the other thing too. What do you want?
It wasn't their job to make Rozier better. You're just trolling.
I know.
Yeah.
So Jimmy, what do you?
That's the reason they're
Jimmy,
not. That's the reason they're
You
not.
actually
Boston
don't know
anymore.
if they make them better until they're gone, though, right? It's like,
Jimmy.
Right. What?
Look at Russell Westbrook's OKC team, and everyone was like the triple-double year, and they're like, it's amazing what he's doing. He's got nobody around him. He had friggin' Sabonis and Oladipo. It's like, and then they leave, and then they're free. And, it's like, oh, well, maybe too much Russ was a bad thing. I'm not saying these guys are that. It's not. But with Tatum, I wonder, we talked about it the other day, he had one of those what we call Ben Simmons lines, Do you want to see more of those instead of 27 to 30-point games? Do you want to see more Ben Simmons lines of his 18, 8, and 8 if he is running the point? And maybe, not shooting as much. There's no way he's going to shoot so little that he'll score that few points. That was a poor shooting night. But ultimately, is that what you want to see more out of him, Bobby? More of a distributor and more of a,
It's going to depend on his teammates. I mean,
Right.
How many assists would he have had on Wednesday if it was a, higher than 32% three-point shooting game? Probably closer to 10 instead of what he ended up having. So, I don't think this is on Jayson in particular as a facilitator. I think he's awesome. You see the hook passes he makes, the vision he has, the pick and roll he runs. I gripe about his turnovers sometimes, 6 again tonight. That's what he has to clean up. But I don't think, this notion that he's just ball hogging and going straight head down to the rim is the truth. I think he's making a concerted effort to dish the ball around a little bit. Yeah. So
he's burying his head and he's just going towards the lane, and those turnovers are absolutely forcing his way into the lane. Almost all of those.
So we gotta pick what we want here, because in 2018 he got phased out by the equal opportunity offense down the stretch of the East Finals, and it was mania in Boston because they couldn't force the ball to him and have him take every shot. Now, when you get into situations like the Detroit loss earlier this year, where they're peppering the ball around to Grant and Smart and letting anybody take the big, great shots late, wide open shots at that, that's a problem too. So, there can be problems with both styles here. I don't know, Jimmy. What do you prefer? Tatum on the ball shooting every single time, or an equal opportunity offense like we saw in 16, 17, 18 even?
It's a superstar league. So, I just want you to play to your superstar strength. That's a trick question, right? Because it really depends on who, I guess, is around you. If you're Tatum, with this team, I think he needs to be leading the team in shots. He's your best raw scorer, right? The problem is you have a guy like Kemba Walker who also needs shots and who also needs the ball. So in that case, you kind of need him to play that point role at certain points. So I don't really know if I have an answer for which would you rather have. I think he's good enough to sort of be a chameleon with the players around him, but he's also still pretty young. So at the same time, he's still growing that part of his game. He's not a natural Ben Simmons.
He's only 19.
He's only 19. I think, he's not even 20 yet.
I know, but Jimmy, what it comes down to is you just have those. You can have the ball. I guess ultimately what you want is him to have the ball, but to make the right decisions, and that's obviously subjective. What is the right decision? But you have those games where he settles for fallaways and difficult contested twos way too often, and you have other games where he's burying and he's trying to force the issue. So ultimately, someone who has a feel for the game, and he does, but as he continues to get that, is going to do less of the bad things and more of the good things. That's what you want to see. But there's no reason to excuse those games where he is clearly forcing the issue.
Agree.
Right.
Completely.
So you just want to see make more right choices, I guess.
Yeah, you don't. What you really don't want.
Yeah.
What you really don't want is for him to form bad habits, and I think that's actually a really important aspect of like Danny Ainge's style of rebuild here has not been, at least with these guys, has not been to just put a shitty team together. Like he's constantly has good players around guys like Tatum and Brown, so they aren't really allowed to just turn into like, oh, I'm just going to take the ball and take 25 shots and not play defense and not hustle back. Like there's always been like a Horford or a Kyrie or a Hayward or whoever around them to sort of, and I'm not going to say mold them, but to keep them in line and to like help them, sort of follow the correct trajectory on becoming an NBA superstar and not taking shortcuts or not becoming like a player who just focuses on, 28 points a game and doesn't do anything else. So yeah, there's going to be bumps and bruises along the way. But I still think these guys are on the right path to being complete players. And really, at the end of the day, that's what you're looking for, is for Tatum to be a complete player. And there's a handful of them in the league that are, I'm not going to ever compare anyone to LeBron, but a complete player in the sense where you can rely on them to score, pass, rebound, play defense, right? So I think that's where they're headed. They're obviously not there yet. And that's why it's so hard to, like,
right. That's why.
On one hand, we're frustrated by like the production and the wins and losses, but on the other, it's like these guys are still relatively young and like their best years are multiple years away. Like, so it's a hard balance, I guess.
But that's it, Jimmy.
Balance.
You're holding him to the standard of what you would want a top
number one in the league.
What you want a top 10 player to be. You're holding him. You see, Jokic come in here, and you're like, that guy literally does the right thing every single time with the ball. I know it's asking a lot, but look, and again, we keep referring to that ESPN top 100, top 50 players thing. Jokic was 10th, and we're like, does he belong there? And then you watch him, and you're like, yeah, he freaking does. Like you want Tatum to be literally a top 3, top 5 MVP candidate every year. That he's in the league, because that's what you need to be a championship team. If he's not, it doesn't mean he's a bad player. He's still a great player. But you got to get to that next level. You want him to be nearly perfect with his decisions and cut out all the stuff. The why he's held to a different standard. He's held to the standard that you want a top 5, top 10 NBA player to be. That's why any criticism of him is just that he's not there, not that he's not good. Okay, I think people confuse that.
I agree.
Right, but I think that's the next step in this progression, though. Like that's the next step. It really reminds me of a young LeBron. Like, remember that was the huge part of LeBron's game. He had to get down, how to be more of a playmaker, how to make his team better because his team wasn't strong enough that he was a shoo-in to make it to the Eastern Conference Finals. Like obviously this is a different situation because LeBron didn't have a guy like Jaylen Brown, but I think the biggest difference here for Jayson Tatum was that obviously he had the experience of going to the Eastern Conference Finals so many times as a young player, and now that it is quote unquote his team, he has to sort of figure this thing out and sort of divvy up the touches with someone like Jaylen Brown. So it's a difficult transition into that role, but I'm not worried about it. Like I just think that's the next step in his progression here, and that's going to lead to more trips to the free throw line too. Like that's another big part of this. When the ball's swinging more often and he's looking to get guys better looks, or if that's a priority, he's getting trips to the free throw line because as soon as that ball swings back, he's getting pummeled or he's getting a great open look, a high percentage shot.
Let's be honest too. Did we ever expect him to be a point guard in this league, a point forward? The fact that it's already happened at 22 is unimaginable. I always thought he had like nice secondary passing skills in the lane out of Duke. I saw a lot of that from him in college, but on the ball, pick and roll, spreading the ball around off the dribble at 22 at the rate he's done it in the playoffs, no less. 5 assists a game, 20% assist percentage. Like, he's ahead of schedule in that regard. So to look at him and say, oh, this guy is a flawed lead guard for a team, like, it's just way too early to say that. And I know there's mistakes he makes along the way, but the whole package is enormously effective. Wasn't the form of them making the East Finals last year, Tatum on the ball, leading the offense, spreading it around, running the pick and roll? I mean, that's what got them there. And there were mistakes along the way. They went 7 games against Toronto largely because of those mistakes, but it was still him in the end that got it done.
Leave it to John, man. He's like, finds the one player that's like an absolute savage in the Joker, and trashes Tatum.
Look,
not Jokic.
We made Durant comparisons, and we deemed that unfair, and it is unfair. But ultimately, again, you're talking about you want him to on a level where you're talking about him in the vein of those super players. That's it.
He's got a long time to get there.
Yeah,
Yes and no. I mean, you don't want to wait around.
John Gannett, though, wouldn't it be great for it to happen now? Like heading into the second half of the season.
I know he's young, but this is seasoned at this point. I don't think it's ridiculous. I don't think it's ridiculous.
It's 2 years of him being in that position. Like
I said, Luka was there in 20 games.
Well, you look at guys like Luka. Booker is another
Luka was at 20 games into his career.
Awful teams.
I mean,
so that's
Suns are good this year, man.
Disadvantage though. Like, what do you mean?
No, you get the opportunity to. Tatum was never on the ball as a rookie or second year in the league ever.
Well, yeah, I mean, he wasn't asked to take on that role, but I think that's easily a part of the game.
He could not have.
After the first 2 games, after his first 2 seasons, like I think it's part of his game that he's expanded on, like on a level that we've overlooked, or at least now we're talking.
It kind of goes back to what I was saying, though, is that these Celtics teams have not allowed like a guy like Tatum to just take over from when he entered the league. There's always been star players along the way, and this is the year, or I guess last year was the beginning of him sort of taking over and being the guy. But even then, you brought in Kemba. So there's always players, veterans, and established stars in this league that have. I'm not going to say anything that they've done negatively for Tatum. I think it's helped him. It's just helped him grow as a player. Maybe not at the speed that we would have seen, but also maybe he's making less mistakes, or maybe he's more of a polished player because of the players that he's played with along the way. And I don't know. I mean, we'll never know, I guess, but that's the route that Ainge took, and that's the way it's going to be for a guy like Tatum and Brown.
It's going to be.
That's just the way
we all agree he's good enough to be the best player on a championship team, or else we wouldn't even be talking about that as an aspiration.
I don't know that yet.
Today, no.
I don't know that
so
yet.
Why would they?
That's what I want there to be. Yeah.
Why were they a pick? They were a popular pick in the bubble to go all the way. I mean, that doesn't exist without what he was doing.
Not before the bubble started. What happened in the things changed within the bubble that made people say, well, wait a second.
Milwaukee was playing like crap. Toronto was playing like crap. And the Celtics looked good. And they had Hayward clicking. And they had Kemba back. And everything looked like it was clicking on all cylinders. So they were fashionable because they were streaking. Miami was a popular pick, too, because they were playing really well also. So, in fact, the two best teams, the 2 teams who were playing the best met in the conference finals. So, I mean, and obviously Hayward getting hurt really, kind of derailed that. And I still think they go to the finals if Hayward plays. But I mean, that was a different team.
Easiest path they'll ever get.
Yeah, my point through all this though is that Tatum's done it at the highest level at this point. So there's things to clean up, but the assessment that he can't be your lead playmaker or best player like that, whoever Goodman talked to said, is just so wrong. I get it. I still want to say